Okay, everyone, to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. A really cool review for you guys from the brand Grand Seiko. A little about Seiko. It was founded back in 1881. They're Japanese in origin, of factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. And this is an example of their high end division, Grand Seiko, which was originally founded back in 1960. Now, in terms of the category, I'd say this falls under that everyday dress watch space. Some key characteristics and design language. You're looking for something that fits within this, this genre. Of course, you're going to want something that's clean, classic, with a rather minimalist design, and something that is, of course, more sensibly sized. This is from their Heritage line, and it is the SBGA459 Blizzard 190th anniversary Takashimaya edition. It's a 44GS case style housing a spring drive movement paired to a uniquely textured dial. You can get this for $4,700 pre-owned from Belmont Watches. So big shout out to the team over at Belmont for sending this piece in so that I can share with you all. There's just so much to be said for Grand Seiko, and so much that's already been said, right? The polishing, the dial texturing, the attention to detail, the amount of handwork that goes into each one of these pieces. It goes without saying, but also you kind of have to mention it because that's how good these are, right? You didn't just end up here because you wanted to just look at it. You also want to hear about the details. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, now big shout out to Belmont Watches. If you haven't been watching the channel for too long, you might not even know that Belmont actually helped source me my own personal Grail Grand Seiko timepiece. And it was a neo vintage one, very, very rare. But thanks to them, I can share these types of pieces with you all. And this one is not, it's pretty far from your run-of-the-mill Grand Seiko. Although, right, it does have all of those beautiful mainstays and those little eccentricities and ornate details that you would associate with the brand. This is one that you're just not going to see out there on the streets very often. A little bit about the dimensions. It comes in at 40 millimeters, and I know some of you are thinking 40 millimeters is rather large for a dressy watch, but I will say that Grand Seiko, and of course, thanks to their Seiko DNA, they have a lot of tricks to really shrink down the visual weight of a watch, and you can see a lot of those on display here. Look at the undercuts, that beautiful beveling on top, that nice little thin strip of satin, really making that mid case appear much thinner. Of course, still very, very sculpted and still very handsome, but somehow it does help. And then that organic line that just kind of curves right there. And then just overall the proportions, right? You do have a little bit of overhang from the case to the bezel. And then of course the dial itself is even smaller there. And the dial, although nice and full of that beautiful texturing, is still well spaced out, so it breathes and it doesn't feel crowded at all, even with the date complication and the power reserve indicator on the front. So 40 millimeters in diameter, 12.9 millimeters thick, again, wearing it quite well. And then 46 millimeters lug to lug, and that's going to be the key measurement for a lot of people. 46 millimeters lug to lug means that it's going to sit nice and centered on a wide array of wrists, even with this male end link that does protrude, but you can see that axis there is nicely turned down, and it only carries slightly off of the natural line of the case, and it actually does follow that case architecture quite beautifully. You can see the curvature of that mid case going down into the drape of this nice bracelet. Now, the crystal here, guys, is going to be a sapphire, dual curved, so that means it's curved on top and curved on underneath. So when you look at it at a very harsh angle, it's going to be still quite legible. It also has an inner AR coating, which is going to provide you with that ultimate clarity, especially when you're looking at it head on, and you're able to just really enjoy that dial that is shimmering and sparkling as if it was almost moving at times. Then getting into the crown, it's actually a screw down year-round crown. So you're going to get 100 meters of water resistance, and you can be very confident with it, although you do have a display case back, because you know that your crown is pushed in and engaged, which means all the seals and everything are working. So with all that to protect your watch, that is very confidence inspiring. Getting into the movement, which you can see displayed here, with of course a little bit of limited edition extra little markers and cues there to Seiko, or say Grand Seiko's beautiful lion crest. Underneath there, you're going to actually see a spring drive caliber 9R65, which is going to be accurate to plus or minus 1 second per day, or 15 seconds per month in terms of its accuracy. So that is pretty outstanding. You're getting 72 hours of power reserve that you can monitor through this beautiful power reserve indicator that is really ornate. Guys, check out just the little finishings there. As you can see, it doesn't compete with the dial itself. It is just, I think, well integrated and does balance really well. And of course, you could have something more plain, but you know what? Then it wouldn't be a Grand Seiko. So I think it's a give and take, especially when it becomes such an iconic feature set, for a watch like this. Now, getting into that dial, that textured pale silver dial, you have the date complication at 3 o'clock, which is nicely framed. You have that power reserve indicator kind of between 7 and 8. And then you have applied indices that are polished and faceted all the way around. Very nice. Those signature dolphin hands that are also polished and faceted. Again, 100 meters of water resistance on a watch that looks this nice. Really fantastic. 19 millimeter lug width, and these are drilled lugs. And then you're going to have this solid multi-link bracelet, which is mostly satin brushed with high polished sides, and then of course those high polished intermediaries that are going to be in between that kind of 3-link setup. So very, very handsome. You're getting screw pin construction, nicely milled swing arm here. No micro adjust, unfortunately, but you do get half link there to dial this in. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. All right, guys, now as you can see, I don't have the clasp closed on here because this is just a loaner in from Belmont Watches, and I don't have the extra links that they provide to the buyer. But I can just kind of drape it on there and give you an idea of how it might look on your own wrist. Of course, I do have a 7.5-inch wrist, so it's going to be quite nice. But one thing you guys are going to notice is that lug to lug is very compact and it's sitting beautifully centered. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get some perspective distortion, and it's going to make the watch seem a little bit larger, right? So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low here, and then just tighten up the frame so you guys can still get a detailed look, but just at a bit of a truer aspect ratio. And look at that. It definitely sits nicely on the wrist, very nice and centered again, very manageable lug to lug. And then you can see how organically the lines on this case really melt away a lot of that heft. Look at that. Now, I wouldn't say it's, some slimline watch, but I mean, look at those lines, that profile. That doesn't look thick to me. So I definitely, am a sucker for all of those undercuts and beveling and all the work that they do to really provide you with something that is going to just flow extremely beautifully on the wrist, hug the wrist nicely, especially when you do have something with a little bit more heft to it generally, because it does have a spring drive movement, does have that that rotor that wants to help charge that 3-day power reserve. So very, very cool. But with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some not loom shots, but low light transition and closing thoughts. Ooh, okay guys, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. I'm already loving the way this looks. All right, but one thing I always like to work in is a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And man, guys, as you can see here, even in this lighting, right, a little dim, you're gonna still get a nice amount of contrast off of that dial because of those high polished facets on the indices and the handset. It can reflect off of all the dark surfaces, while the dial is just absorbing all of the light in the room. So very, very cool, guys. And of course, with that pale silver layout, the nice thing is it's going to pick up different colors based off of your surroundings, and it's going to be able to have a little tint of whether it be blue, green, or what, you know, whatever area there you're in. Of course, I do have a nice little reflecting board there off camera, so you guys can see a full spectrum of just how much kind of play that you guys can get off of this piece. And man, it looks gorgeous. Look at the depth to that dial. Whew. And again, it's a very unique space, guys, in terms of, you know, a dressy watch that is overbuilt, right? Like, that's not necessarily anything anybody goes out and asks for, but, you know, there was a time when nobody asked for an iPhone. You know, the most popular phones were just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then one day, you know, Apple just kind of let us know what we never knew we always wanted. And I think you can kind of get a little bit of that from a Grand Seiko, where maybe this isn't on paper what you might request, but man, seeing it in the metal, it's hard to even imagine, you know, a way to improve upon a formula like this, because it is just so beautiful and at this point quite iconic. So with that said, let's actually get the lights back on here and get into some closing thoughts. On the wrist, this definitely wears a lot more like a, let's say, a 39 due to that signature case and of course those dial proportions. In terms of model variants, there are many modern 44GS style pieces to choose from, so you know, kind of endless from that amount, from that perspective. Now in terms of comparable models, Grand Seiko really lead that overbuilt dressy everyday watch category, with I'd say maybe Nomos being around, you know, another notable brand that, although aesthetically very different, has a similar formula for success around sporty dress watches and dressy sports watches. Of course, you could always draw comparisons to similarly themed pieces from industry mainstays, as you know, such as Rolex or Omega, but typically, you know, those are going to be more specific to the product lines and not necessarily the brands as a whole, because they're going to have, you know, I'd say a good amount more diversity when it goes into some of their other pieces, whereas I think Grand Seiko feels a little bit more specialized within this space. So for me, guys, bottom line, the Blizzard is an absolute standout, even among Grand Seiko's vast catalog of beautifully textured dials. The 44GS case architecture being one of, if not their most iconic silhouette, really helps to combine for a timepiece that personifies all of the facets that make Grand Seiko the brand that they are today. So let me know what you think down in the comments below, and another huge thank you to the team over at Belmont Watches for sending this piece in, letting me borrow it, spend some time with it so that I could share it with you all. So let me know again in the comments below if you like the video. Please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.